Hi everybody and welcome back to the painting channel. Today I'm going to be doing a little watercolor of a beautiful seaside town called Broadstairs, and it's unique because it's got this wonderful structure on the end of the harbour arm, and it really is in a lovely sandy area. There are sort of bathing huts, lovely buildings, and it's also the home, I believe, to Dickens, and so it's a beautiful area, and I just want to do a little bit with the harbour arm. So before we go any further, I'm going to try and draw it. Let's see how we get on. Okay, so like I say, that this is Viking Bay in Broadstairs. It's the most charming and beautiful little seaside harbour inlet and sandy beach on the East Kent coast of Kent. Now it's got this wonderful iconic shape on top of the end of the harbour arm. I think it looks like a top hat or a sort of pointy witch's hat in a sense, but I think it's a restaurant or something similar to that, and it just gives this whole harbour its distinctive form, especially when you consider that beyond it there's just the open sea, and you know, you've got it stretching off of the sand base there, and it's just very, very distinctive. And Broadstairs is also home to the wonderful Blea House, which is the seaside home of Charles Dickens, no less, when he was around and penned many of his great works looking out to sea, and yeah, it's just a lovely piece of history. And also there is a wonderful old building just out of shot that I'm not sketching it in this painting, but when you look at it you wonder how the heck it's still standing. Again, I'm not sure what its use is, whether it's a restaurant or cafe today or what it is, but it is one of the older buildings in the area, and it's right on the seafront there, and has a wonderful history. Now the fishing boats here, when the tide is high, abound. There are loads of them that come in here and moor up, and I guess that on this day that all of the boats were out to sea fishing, doing whatever they do, and when they get off in the high tide, and they're all out there doing whatever it is, and they will be waiting for the tide to return, come in, so that they can bring back their catches and go about their normal business. But on this occasion there were just two boats, so I put both of those into the image. And other than the sort of complexity of this part, the harbour arm, getting that building on the end looking a bit right, the steps down the side which I'm just putting in now, there were one or two large masts and some pretty nice decorative lampposts along the harbour arm, a few boats that I put in, a few dinghies that have been stood up as tenders, that I guess some of the people that use them for their boats or whatever they do for them, they were all standing up at the end there. So the rest of the drawing was fairly simple once I got the main architecture right and got that sorted out. Now for the sky, it's pretty leaden sky, so I used an indigo mix with a little bit of Indian red into that and made it a bit thicker as it come down to the horizon. The reason I wanted to make that very deep or darker towards the horizon line was so that when I put that very pale greenish looking sea in, which I'm putting in now, then when I put a lot of water to that and make it almost disappear in terms of pigment and value, so I didn't want too much of the green, just a hint of the green. But that made the horizon and the sky stand out really well. And you know how the sun or the light, when you get that really thick stormy look, makes that sea quite bright and quite icy looking. And to sort of reflect that, I wanted to put in the sand. Now the sand is very wet and it reflected the sky, but I wanted to make the pinky reds and mauves that I've used in here to react with the green sea as well. I've left the big center section because that's going to reflect the warmth of the harbour arm in that area as I'm looking toward it. As I say, the tide has recently just gone out, so the sand is very wet. But I used a complementary in here. I'd used blues and violets in the rest of the sand, but I'd used a deeper oranges and umbers to come into this beautiful reflection, and I've let some of that bleed and I've left some of it quite hard edged. And I think that as this settles down, you'll see how this really works, and it just subtly blends into the rest of the sand in the foreground. And I will add to that too. I just wanted to get this in while the rest of it was pretty moist, so there's a bit of a bleed, but not too much. I will go in with some darker values and some stronger values into that later. I'm using some damp brush just to take off some of the edges of that reflection so it doesn't creep too far. And you've really got to judge the wetness. You've really got to sort of see how far you need to go before you leave that or put something in or add a bit of water to it. And it's just sort of a judgment call. Now I'm using a very, very dark. I'm using predominantly indigo with a little bit of transparent orange in it to warm it up a bit, but it is predominantly quite a cold colour. I'm using it extensively on the harbour wall, and it's going to go in dark, but I will lift some off and I will actually change some of those colour values. But essentially we're going in with the dark shade, very, very heavy, and it's silhouetted against that sky. All of a sudden that sky becomes quite light when you put this dark mark or this dark mass in, and that was really it's really what makes this quite an iconic image to see, because it doesn't really matter whether it's very dark and cloudy sky or whether it's very, very sunny sky. It does act as a silhouette, and it does become this very significant shape, which is what I spoke about earlier. Now I've put several bands of colour. I've put a bit of the greenier colour on, lifting some light out of the blue, and that gives me a bit of banding which is reflected in the stonework of the harbour arm itself. So it's not all one solid colour. I used a bit of water to create and lift out some of those pigments in that dark, which you can see more over on the end and the angle. So now I'm going to carry on with the same value all the way through the rest of the harbour arm, and towards the end of it I'm going to lift out some of that colour to reveal some of the lighter elements of the wall. And it also works so that it doesn't become a very, very solid lump of dark. That we don't really want. We need to introduce some other tones and values. I'm leaving the negative spaces, or I'm painting the negative spaces and trying to leave white spaces that are some of the decking or some of the parts of the boats that are resting there. And you can see I'm using one or two lighter marks and adding one or two other colours, a bit of orange coming in to suggest the darks in and around the base of the harbour. I've allowed it to dry, as you can see, and now I'm working back in on the boats, putting a bit of red, a bit of blue, a bit of darks and different colours in that are typical of the boats that were there on the day. I'm not trying to put too much detail in, just to suggest that they are the cabins, the doors, and little bits and pieces that you can see that allow you to identify them as fishing boats or small vessels. So that's all I'm doing with that. I'm not going to try and get too detailed with them. This whole exercise is more about that lovely shape into the sea and all the reflections in the wet sand in front of me. But of course these boats they are part of the scene. They are really the people in a scene, in a sense. They make it, they give it scale too, which is something to worth bearing in mind. Now I'm putting in some of the shadows. Now they're not all dark marks as shadows. Some of these are bits of debris that are laying on the bottom of the harbour ground, as it were, on the sand. And there's also a lot of kelp or weed that lays around this part and also around the waterline on the beach. Now I'm putting the sandy colours in, which is a bit of yellow ochre and a bit of raw sienna, not yellow ochre, raw sienna, and some transparent orange went into that sand, and I started to hint at the bit of reflection in the wet sand. Now I'm coming through with a much warmer colour of umbers and orange, just to give an extra layer of depth to this reflection. But I'm putting in, using a smaller brush, and I'm putting in a lot more detail than was there in the first pass. The first pass was setting it up to see roughly where I wanted it to be. Now I'm putting the dark values, but I'm also leaving some of the lighter values in there. That significantly shows where the water is running and little eddies within the reflection itself. I will come back in with some gouache later, but for the part right now, this is all I need to do, and I'm setting up the strength. It looks strong, but it has to look strong because it will dry much lighter than it is right now, so you do need to worry about that. I put a little red buoy in. I think in hindsight it didn't come off as well as it could have done, but you can still see it's there. It looks okay, and it looks red against the wall of the harbour. Now I'm starting to use some of the very similar colours, but a little bit raw sienna coming in there to suggest the little gentle eddies of water trickling in, or I don't know whether they're going in or going out at this stage, but small waves off out to sea, and they get a little bit bigger, a little bit lumpier as they come in, but then they just end up as this gentle little trickle in of the wave, and I think that comes off quite nicely in this picture. You can see the sea didn't need a lot of painting, to be quite honest with you. It almost paints itself if you get that base color right, and the waves, the value of the color used there is about right. It almost just paints itself. Now I'm putting in some of the lamp posts that are adorning the top of the harbour arm. There are flag poles, posts, and all sorts of things going on there. And I didn't put too much detail. I just wanted to put a head in and the pole itself and suggest that. And I'm putting a bit more detail, a bit more darks into the harbour now. As you can see, it dried a lot lighter than it first went down. You will find this always with watercolour. It will dry up much lighter than the value that you first put down. So if you really want it dark, then you must remember to make a much darker mix, which is more pigment and less water to do the job. Now I'm trying to put in some of these dark marks. Now some of them are shadows, some of them are reflections, but a lot of them are seaweed or kelpy stuff that is laying on the wet sand. There are also some lovely reflections, and I'm bringing the brush two ways. I'm bringing stuff down, but I'm also laying the brush coming across. So you've got this cross hatching of lights and darks to suggest reflections one way and objects laying on the sand in the opposite way. And I'm reflecting some of those posts in the water. I think that to me is the most fun when I'm painting water, or the effects of water, is the lovely way that you can create all these wonderful reflections. Now to give some support to the base of the picture, I'm putting a little bit of a greenier, grayer suggestion to the sand in the foreground, and where it's sort of starting to dry out on the sand, I put a little bit of a wash over everything there so that it wasn't all one value. And I think that supports the painting, and it also gives support to the bottom of the picture. I think that was quite important to do that. And I just looked at taking off all the images now and cleaning up all the edges so that I didn't get a build-up of moisture. And often that can happen if you leave too much water down at the bottom where you've got tape, it can bleed back and cause you an unsightly cauliflower or a bleed back or whatever you want to call that. So now I'm coming in and I'm just doing all the bits of detail, just I's and T's really, checking bits and pieces that I need to do. And I will be honest with you, I have cut it out of this bit, but I do add it in at the end. I actually dropped an awful bit of paint right in the bottom part of the sky to the right hand side of the picture. As I say, it took a lot of film to get it out, and I couldn't put it into this time lapse. So just to let you know that it did happen, but I wasn't going to destroy the picture because I was so pleased about the way the reflection and everything looked. I just didn't have the heart just to dump the picture at the end of it, and it served its purpose as being a very, very good study to show you guys how the whole thing was going to finish off. So I have made that mistake and I'm trying to cover it up now, and I'm putting an extra layer of dark sky over, but if you look carefully you can see it. There's a little dark mark in there, and as hard as I tried I could not get rid of it. So when I got to the end of this actual image and painting it, I sort of talk about the whole thing being wrecked, and to a point it was wrecked, but it served as a good demonstration piece for you people to enjoy and get something from. So yeah, at the end of this though, when it dried up the next day, I looked at it again and I felt that, you know, if I'm a bit careful and a little bit clever, I actually could save this picture. So wait to my little prologue at the end of this video, watch it to the end and see what happens, and see whether I saved it or whether I binned it. And you can actually add in your comments as to whether or not it was worth the effort to try and save it, and whether it was a successful save or not. All I'm doing now is putting a few little lead-in lines, little taps with a rigger of warm colours against the cool, just to finish this picture off. And I was so enjoying this. I really did have a lot of fun with this painting, and I'm glad I did it. I've painted this scene so many times, mainly in oil, gotta say, but I have painted it so many times, and it never fails to excite my senses as an artist, just to try and create an image of Viking Bay from in one form or another, and from one aspect toward another. So I'm going to gas on about it. One thing I will say to each and every one of you, in this horrible time that the world is experiencing, I do hope each and every one of you are keeping safe and enjoying as best you can your isolation. And if you are painting pictures, then paint them in with the isolation. I have got a lot on offer through my Patreon, and on top of that I've started doing some live streaming as of next week. There will be certainly one or two live streams coming off. I hope, if I can get all the tech sorted out, a few tiers where I can in my Patreon, where I can help you and do some one-to-one contact and help teach you all sorts of things. So if there's something I can help you with, please make contact with me, and I'm sure there's something I can do to help you further your artistic endeavors with direct contact or indirect contact. But in the meanwhile, keep watching these videos, keep liking and subscribing, and all those things that I keep asking you to do. But it really does help me grow my channel. These videos do take a lot to make and a lot of my time in editing, so it's great to know that people are enjoying it. Just lastly on this, touching on this, you've been watching me put a few gouache marks in, traces of areas of light and ripple through the sand into the reflection. It is striking. And on that note, I've just about finished this, so yeah, I'm glad you've been watching it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm signing it off now, and we're going to move on to the next picture. I hope you've enjoyed this. It wasn't without a problem, and I still see that problem there. Not a lot I can do about it. So this painting probably will never go on sale because of that. I am particular that if I have an issue within the work itself, I'm not going to put the painting out. So it works as a demonstration piece for you guys to see, I hope, and including on what you shouldn't be doing with this piece of work. So yeah, but I hope you got something from it. I might well attempt this on another occasion and see how we go from there. I'm going to take the reveal off and let's just see what we're left with. It's a big shame because I was really enjoying it, but it's the way it goes. Sometimes it happens, you can't change it, it's done. And anyway, before I sort of start crying over it, which I'm not going to do, not on camera anyway. Yeah, I hope you got something from it anyway. And as I said just now, I did enjoy painting it right up until that point. But have a go yourselves. The reference will be online for you to download and use, as I said right at the beginning. And if you like what you've seen, then maybe you'll press that like button, and you might also be kind enough to put a comment if you would. You don't have to, but it's great. Share it if you've got friends who don't ordinarily see my channel. Let them see it too. But above all, I would love it for you to subscribe to the channel. Not everybody who watches my video does subscribe, but if you would, it would be fantastic. It helps me grow the channel. It helps me know that people are enjoying what I'm doing. It doesn't cost you a penny to do it, so maybe you consider subscribing, and that way you get notified if you click that bell icon as well, as and when each time I upload a new video. And I keep on about this, but don't forget also there's a lot more for you to enjoy over on my Patreon. You can get involved on that in several layers, several tiers, from very, very inexpensive to much more expensive. It depends on what you want to do and how much you want to get from it. And I'm always adding material to both that and this. So with that in mind, please, everybody, stay safe in these terrible times that are around the world. Be healthy. I hope to catch each and every one of you on the next video very, very soon. Keep painting. Keep those brushes and pencils moving. I'll catch you all soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now. So, this is just a little add-on section, because once this had dried up, I felt that maybe I could do something with this. It was annoying. There's not a lot that I can actually do to that, but I felt that here goes nothing. If I can try and put maybe a couple of seagulls in, that's the thought I've got. At worst case scenario, I still cut it down, but I might just get lucky and make it look a little bit less of a problem by just putting some birds in. Okay guys, well, I'm not sure if that's a full recovery or not. As it stood, the painting was pretty much wrecked, and I felt that by doing something to it, it might help it, or it'll put it closer to the rubbish bin. I think that it's now maybe saleable, in as much as I really loved what was going on in the rest of this here, but that just upset me. But now I put the birds in and just give that a little bit more cover over on the sort of the sky and the suggestion of that storm again. I think we've got away with it, really. I could argue that I need to put in a bit dark here, but I'm not going to go with that. I'm just going to leave it as is and be thankful that it's not torn up and put in the bin. But yeah, so anyway, have a go at this yourselves and see how you get on, and let's see the result. So with that said, catch you all soon, catch you all in the next video. Don't know what it's going to be, but I'm working on them all the time pretty much, so enjoy. Bye bye for now.